They had Nick Fuentes on fucking No Jumper, you guys.
No Jumper, coolest podcast in the
When
world.
else am
And
I going to go
today,
over
me,
this?
AD, and Flacco are going to be having a conversation with probably the most controversial person that we're ever going to talk to, apparently, Nick Fuentes. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Sneeko was supposed to be on this, and he may be joining us at some point. But yeah, we're in here today to have a conversation, at least in part because Sneeko has been urging me to, I don't know, accept Nick Fuentes into hip hop. What are our stated goals for this podcast, Nick?
Well, I think we're going to have a good discussion. Well, I know that you had on Tariq Nasheed recently, apparently to debunk me. You know, he talked about me and some of my views, so maybe we could talk about.
So one of the things that Nick Fuentes believes in, one of his more controversial opinions, is that of race realism. Now, what is race realism? Well, he'll probably go into it in a very nice way and fucking way that makes him not seem like a white supremacist. But race realism means that races are good at certain things, right? In Nick Fuentes' mind, a person born black and a person born white in a complete vacuum um, both would have characteristics that are just genetic of their race or just inherent of their race, right? He's saying that the black person tends to be more athletic while the white person tends to be more intelligent, which is completely untrue. You can go into reasons why African Americans are more athletic because they say that's because we were bred like cattle during slavery. So when you breed the strongest with the strongest, then you end up with the strongest. So that's sort of why we tend to be more athletic. Now, if you have somebody, in a complete vacuum, right, black or white, they both have the same fucking opportunities to get strong or to get smart, depending on their surroundings. Now, Nick doesn't agree with that. So
Some of those things and recent news with Kanye, but whatever you want to do. Also, is this live or is this pre-recorded?
This is not live. We're going to drop it tomorrow.
yeah, they're recording it because he's gonna say some anti-Semitic or fucking he's gonna say shit that could possibly get them kicked off of YouTube. So they're gonna cut that shit out.
Okay, I was under the impression this was going to be live.
Are you live?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great.
Well, that's
okay.
great. Yeah,
So-
good job.
How would you say that? What's your overall opinion of hip hop? Let's just throw that out there. Let's get some Nick Fuentes opinions on hip hop.
Well, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of hip hop. I wouldn't say that I'm like a hip hop head, but I listen to rap music. Predominantly Kanye West. I know that's going to sound like I'm bandwagoning because of the recent developments, but I've been a
Yeah.
huge Kanye fan for probably 5 or 6 years. But I also listen to other things. I listen to like Nas and Tribe Called Quest and,
Oh my God.
and things like that. So I like hip hop music. I like
God, I can't listen to Once Again knowing that fucking Nick Fuentes listens to that shit, or there's a chance that he does.
rap music.
So black art is just fine with you. You don't mind hearing the lived experiences of black people. I feel like most people would assume that that's not something you'd be interested in.
No, I actually like a lot of black music, not just hip hop, but I like soul music. I like funk music, R&B. I'd probably say most of the music I listen to actually is black. I listen to a lot of music. I listen to a lot of white stuff too, but yeah, no, I enjoy that.
So you don't like to be called a white supremacist?
No, I don't identify that way at all.
I mean,
Why
you
not?
are though, so
Well, I'm Christian, so there are arguments about genetics and things. Like I think there's definitely a genetic reality to life. About there are white people, there are black people, and there are Hispanic and Asian people. Like races are real.
that's yeah.
But
Okay,
as a
sure.
Christian, I believe that we all have souls as well, and so we're all equal in that sense before God. I think that there are differences between people as individuals and as groups, but we all fundamentally have an equality in the sense that we're all created.
You know your last
So,
name
Nick,
is Fuentes,
you know
right?
what you're doing, and you know that people watching this at home are going to read between the lines when you say race is real. they're going to take that as a dog whistle. I believe that's how they would use that phrase.
Yes.
To indicate that you're advocating for race realism, aka black people are not as smart as white people and Asian people.
Can we just take a moment, okay? Like, we come from fucking when Adam used to fucking interview rappers that would pass out in the back of fucking, like, behind him when they were making their way out. Like, look at this shit now. Now he's coming at Nick Fuentes with the fucking jobbers. Let him know.
Well, that's not really what race realism is. And I know that
Okay.
Destiny and I've seen you entertain this as well. People say that I put on a certain face and I put on a facade and I disguise my real views. But I'm very open about my real views. I've been canceled for my real views. I've been canceled because I don't hide my real views. And when I say race is real, that doesn't mean black people are dumber than white people. It means that there is a reality to race which is both constructed and biological, in the sense that race is real in the sense that, like, you know, some people say I'm not white because I'm Italian, Mexican, and Irish. But for the sake of example, you know, let's say I'm white, and that means certain things to me in a constructed way. You know, it means I have a certain nationality, and you could say there's a history there and there's a cultural thing. But you could also say there's a genetic component too. Like, white people have white skin. That's determined by genetics. And so race realism is simply the idea that race is a biological reality. Now, what you're talking about is these disparities in IQ, which someone who believes in race would say that disparities in IQ, well, IQ is a heritable characteristics. You would say that that's, you know, the difference in IQ between the races is a function of a genetic difference. It doesn't mean that blacks are dumber than whites. And by the way, you know...
No, it's not. I mean, honestly, like, it's I think more what determines IQ is your environment and your surroundings, right? Like, the reason why you say it's inherited is because, you know, you have people living in poor circumstances. If you're in a poor area, 9 times out of 10, your schools are going to be more poor, right? So you're not going to get a good education because the schools aren't going to have as much money as the schools in, you know, more wealthy areas. So you live in a poor area, you don't have access to good education already, right? Now, because you don't have access to good education, you're not going to get a job that's going to give you now money to fucking get a better education for your children, because you're going to get a job that's going to pay you enough to live in that same poor area. So you sort of stay at the fucking ground. You know what I'm saying? So when you do that, like, that's what perpetuates dumber people. It's not race at all. It's environment, it's surroundings. You know what I mean?
I brought up Destiny a moment ago because he's been popularizing this. He's been trying to say, oh, you know, Nick believes these things, but he's going to put on his good face. You know, Destiny believes in the same facts. He just doesn't believe in the genetic explanation, which is a legitimate explanation. He just doesn't tell you that.
Right. So, I mean, would you say that you've been smeared by the mainstream media or whatever as
5 minutes in and we're already bringing up Destiny? Awesome.
being
Based,
more
as he would
racist
say.
than you are?
Yeah. I mean, they lie about my views because, like I said, I'm very open about my views. I'm not ashamed of them. I'm looking for people to tell my views, and I can give it in the most extreme way. But people say things like Nick wants to live in a whites-only country, and Nick thinks whites are better than other people. And it's like, I don't believe those kinds of things. So, yeah, so I am smeared.
What is your overall opinion about African American people?
I think they're. What do you mean, my overall opinion?
Just off the back, what do you think about black people?
I think they're good people. I love people. I love all kinds of people. I love black people. You know, my family goes back in Chicago like 4 generations, and so my family's grown up with black people, lived with and among black people for over 100 years. You know, my grandmother, she grew up in the projects in Chicago. My parents, they ran a security school on the south side of Chicago, South Loop, where they train a lot of black people how to shoot guns and become security guards and cops and things like that. I grew up in the suburbs, so I didn't have as much interactions with black people as my parents and grandparents, but I think they're upstanding people. I like their art. I think they're talented. I'm friends with a lot of black people. So,
But you would rather live in an ethno state and all the races just sort of stick together?
I wouldn't
Sort
say
of stick
that
together?
necessarily, because the thing is that all countries have some amount of diversity. What I would say is I'm against immigration, because America's always been a white and black country since its founding. When the United States was founded, or when Europeans began to settle, even though obviously blacks were brought over as slaves, when they were emancipated, and before that, it was a country that was white and black, and that is a dynamic that's changing in the last 60 years. Because
God, before that, it was pretty brown actually. Before the whites came in and colonized,
of immigration.
What's your
I don't
point?
know that I would say like, oh, I'd prefer to. I mean, it is what it is. The country is what it is. I just want to stop immigration.
In what sense?
God, I bet Native Americans really wanted to stop immigration too once upon a time, but that shit didn't work or happen, did it?
It's like you just think that we allow people into the country too easily, or do we not allow the right kinds of people? I've heard that argument, that it's easy for like low skill workers to get into America, and that they sometimes make it hard for like PhDs to stay in the country.
It's just too many. That's the problem. Because the thing is, I guess I'll say it another way. I'm not necessarily against immigration, but we have now is like millions of people coming in every year, where you're getting tens of millions in a very short amount of time. And it's just changing how the country is fundamentally. Countries can have immigration. They can bring in, you could say, a lot of people without changing like the demographic composition of the country, which is what we're doing. We used to have an immigration policy for a long time where it restricted the immigration groups based on national origins, and we would let them in waves, so they would come in and they'd assimilate. What we had after the 65 Immigration Act and the 1990 Immigration Act is they just opened up the spigot of immigration, and the people come and they just don't stop, and they come in bigger numbers every year, and it never relents, and it never stops. And what's happening now is it's just totally changing the landscape of the country culturally, in terms of the language, our identity as a nation.
Okay, if it was so easy for immigrants to just fucking come over legally because the spigot is just open, then why is there so many fucking illegal immigrants coming through that are literally almost dying to get into the fucking country? Like, not even exaggerating. Like, they're in a group where other people in that group died getting there, right? There's a chance that the fucking truck can just be pulled over and then everybody in that motherfucker dies because the fucking driver's too scared to go across the border, and he's like, fuck, I got paid already? All right, you know what? We're good here. And just stops, pulls over. Maybe if he's a nice guy, he'll open the fucking truck door to let you go. But you know what? That could be a little bit too suspicious if you just have a bunch of Mexicans coming out of a truck that you just ran from. So, might just want to leave that closed. You know what I mean? Like, why are people risking everything to get over here illegally if the so-called spigot is open for just illegal immigrants to come through? It's because it's hard. It takes a long fucking time for immigration to process and get people through, because a lot of people are legally applying for immigration and aren't hearing back from fucking the fucking United States whatever fucking service for months. You know what I mean? Like, they're not hearing back from them. They wouldn't be trying to get. It's not only criminals that are trying to get fucking out here. It's because fucking Jose, the worker, can't get down here legally, so he has to do it illegally. Straight up. No fucking laws are making it easier for immigrants to get down here. Okay.
And that's honestly bad for everybody that considers themselves an American, I think. So, I mean, we can have low-skilled people.
Also, immigration sort of helps the fucking economy, right? Like, if you, no economist is going to tell you that immigrants coming in makes the economy worse. No. Okay. Immigrants coming in keeps the fucking minimum wage a little bit lower, and keeps the minimum wage sort of steady, right? If you get to a point where unemployment gets to like 2%, then you're going to have problems with starting to raise the minimum wage so you can get more workers. And if you have an issue with that, the only people that can raise the fucking wage on such short notice are like big companies like Walmart, fucking Target, places like that, right? Mom and pop shops don't have the money to pay somebody fucking $15-16 an hour to fucking sweep up the floors and shit like that. That's just not working. But fucking Walmart can. They can do that shit all day long. Okay, so when you don't have immigrants come in, you have the fucking minimum wage. You have the minimum wage, excuse me. You have an issue with the minimum wage raising. Okay, and like then you have an issue with fucking small businesses not being able to fucking operate. So like that's sort of who gets fucked with that, right? Am I right?
People to address, the labor needs or high skilled people, depending on, what you need. But bring in, 100,000 people. Don't bring in like 3 million people in a year,
Right. What I will say is that when I see like a fucking refugee crisis, I'm just like, why is there any kind of pressure on us to allow any more people than we fucking feel like allowing into our country? Like, it's just not, it shouldn't be our problem at a certain point. And it's just crazy that we're expected to make this our problem, that people are just showing up and trying to come in. I don't know.
And that's the question, is what is their government's responsibility to their own people? Every time there's a government that gets toppled, or, there's a horrible economic disaster or something, like in Haiti. Haiti's a good example. There's something going on right now. And the Haiti government collapsed because their government stole all this money. They had this deal with Venezuela where Venezuela loans them oil, and the Haitian government can defer payment for the oil, and they could sell the oil and then make money on it, and then they were supposed to use that for social programs, and the government just stole all the money. So then
I don't know enough about the Haiti situation to comment on it, and I'm probably not going to look it up. But I do know Nick Fuentes, and he is notorious for switching things up in his favor. So that may or may not be what happened, but I know Nick Fuentes is probably either not telling the whole story or telling it in a way to sort of prove his fucked up racist point.
When the Venezuelan economy collapsed, they stopped exporting oil, and the fuel prices shot up, and now the Haitian government owes the money on the oil. And so now the economy's in free fall. There's gangs controlling the streets. And now all these refugees are coming to the United States and Central America.
Look at this refugee right here.
Gang. We talk about Haitians.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sneeko, welcome to the gang, I guess.
Panel.
Yeah.
Not a gang. I'm not in a gang with Nick. I'll take that back.
I'm in a gang with Nick.
You are.
I'm in God's gang with Nick and Ye.
Jesus gang.
I'm glad that you're back. Well, you guys, AD will agree with you on that. He's a big God guy.
Oh,
because if it wasn't for
Nick and Ye.
Jesus gang.
I'm what am I gonna say? Fuck Nick Fuentes. I like Sneeko. I don't get why Sneeko's fucking with Nick Fuentes. But I like Sneeko. I don't follow Sneeko though. You know what I mean? I'm not looking to him for advice. I just like the kid. Like if I knew him, I'd be like, that's that's the little homie. But man, Fuentes, bruh, you need to stay away from him.
I'm glad that you're back. Well, you guys, AD will agree with you on that. He's a big God guy.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, but I'm glad that Sneeko is here because this was all his plan. I think that the whole theme here is basically Sneeko saying that Nick Fuentes should be normalized and treated like a part of acceptable society.
Nope.
And that's what we're trying to hash out today.
Nope.
He should be. And I think now that Ye's getting canceled and that he just signed with Parlay is proving the fact that if you talk about a specific group, that you will automatically be deplatformed. And you saw, I don't know if you talk about what happened with Nori, but Nori went on every fucking radio show apologizing for someone else's comments because all Ye said was he's jealous of Jewish power. That's as far as it went. And then even if someone's
That's a
on
nice
your
view
platform,
of what he said. He actually said something like way more
It was,
aggressive.
Yeah.
but it was.
Let him
all
know. Push
because
back on that
of
shit,
the George
Adam.
Floyd comments.
That too. I think like the Jews stuff almost got pushed to the background in favor of people really trying to cancel him for the George Floyd shit.
Nah, hell nah.
No,
I think the
100%,
Jewish stuff was
100%.
definitely like the prominent issue there, right?
I think they're
And then here comes fucking Flacco. God fucking damn it, Flacco.
both issues, but I just felt like I saw a lot more people honing in on the George Floyd shit.
I've never seen anybody, like quote unquote, get mass canceled for being quote unquote racist, right? In terms of somebody black right now, I believe that Kanye, especially like this morning with Hot 97, they brought him on to like address like his statements towards like
I look like I'm part of the panel.
like the quote unquote like Jews, right? Not
Come on,
right,
Flacco, get the fuck out of here
look at
with
this,
that
though.
shit.
Again, but the main issue was Kanye was quote unquote anti-Semitic, and he got canceled for that. And then Kanye went on Drinks Champ and pretty much doubled down on his takes on Jews, and that's what I think the issue is, bro. And again, like me personally, I don't think that Revolt or or like IG or like YouTube is out here canceling Kanye because he said some racist shit.
Well, we don't know if
about black folks.
we don't know if the Drink Champs interview was removed because of Revolt making the decision or YouTube deciding to remove it. Although
Dab
if
time, baby.
YouTube might have said we're gonna remove it if you don't remove it, or Revolt might have just done it on their own accord.
Yeah,
It was probably Nori's publicist. His manager called him up and
Private
said,
in
"Yo,
it though.
but
Ye
Nori
was wilding.
Yeah.
Ye was talking crazy about the Jewish power. So what you need to do to protect yourself in your bank account right now is delete the video and go on every single radio show and apologize, or else they're going to come after everything and all your money." And so he did that. He said, "Okay, it's actually not worth it. I don't care what Ye said. I'm sorry. I just want to keep my bank account, and I don't want to go on a no-fly list because of something that Ye said."
Well, it is weird if you're Nori and Kanye just start saying like, "Well, George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose," and I mean, you're not the fucking coroner. Like, what do you know? Like, how is
Okay,
Nori
but-
supposed to respond to that?
stick to the science of it though.
Yeah,
They
but-
said that he lost his life because of a lack of oxygen.
But does
You
Nori
know what I
have
mean?
these facts memorized? Like, that's why it's awkward, and that's why people say that we shouldn't platform people like Nick Fuentes
He's too smart.
because they're just going to say some random shit, and we're just going to go along with it. But the more specific accusation about Nick is that he is basically bundling up his white supremacist ideas in this nice sports coat and everything, and that he acts real cool. Hey, I love black art. Yeah, Nas is cool, and that's
Number
what I
two,
like.
baby.
That's what people
You're
are going to
still up
fucking
there.
destroy me for. Is if I am not
Even-
perceived as
not pushing
being
back.
aggressive enough towards Nick.
And I seen some shit today, and I said, you know what? I usually don't do my homework and shit like that. I seen some shit today that made me disgusted as an African American
Well,
today.
lay it out there, AD.
All right, so for one, you said you never seen black people jog before.
At Aubrey. Nah,
You
that's
were
not
disgusted
funny.
by that?
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
white
disgusted
people
by that
jogging
because-
is a white people activity.
No. But in the sense of Ahmaud Arbery, you know what I'm saying, the way he lost his life.
Speak it into existence, bruh.
Because jogging in a neighborhood and then some, you know what they did to him. That's fucked up. You know what I'm saying? I'm a black person. I don't look like I jog, but I jog. You know what I mean? Like,
Come on, where do you jog? You jog on the
Yeah.
streets?
nigga,
in
no,
Lululemons?
I don't live in the streets anymore. I done moved out the streets, so I jog in a nice neighborhood.
Well, you
where
still
I
got
stay
street.
right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the
To
street.
the sidewalk.
yeah.
Well, and if you look at the specifics of the case, though, and that's a little bit of old news, so I may be a little fuzzy on the details, but he was jogging a long way from where he lived. He was jogging in boots. You know, you can jog, but usually jog in sneakers, you jog in gym shoes, you don't jog in boots. And there was a series of break-ins reported in the area, too, and he was caught on camera on that construction site. And I remember at the time, Matt Walsh from Daily Wire was like, this is just something that guys do. We go in, we climb the fence, we jump in, and we walk around construction sites to see. And it's like, okay, so he's in boots, he's miles from his house, he's jogging, he's on the construction site, there's burglaries in the area. Now, I'll admit, the way they pulled a gun on him, I would probably say that was probably over the line. And you know,
You see how he plays it off though? Watch. And then I want to see if they give him any pushback.
they got charged for that. I would say, is that a first degree murder? No. You know, what do you call that? I'm not like a lawyer. I don't know what you would call that. But the point is, they try to make it out like this was the new Ku Klux Klan. The most you could say about it is the guys were overzealous about it.
But a guy ended up losing his life at the end of it.
Yeah.
And I think that for once again
For
them to
technically
pull,
jogging.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you can't argue if all those facts are true of a guy fucking far from home jogging in work.
Yeah, dude. You don't know about Nick Fuentes? he's gonna get you kind of mad. He's gonna get you a little mad.
Boots. That is pretty out of the ordinary. I think that the main issue people had with it was just the amount of
I gotta do
force
my
that
Roger
those guys
Stone video
demonstrated
first.
and how comfortable they seemed to be with like basically taking the law into their own hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, should they have pulled a gun on him? Like I said, I think that was inappropriate. But they tried to expand this because that preceded the George Floyd thing by a few months. They tried to turn that into there's a systemic white supremacy problem among the police, and it's like that's where you draw the line. Is this sort of like a bad situation, or does this represent this horrible undercurrent? I think if anything, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah,
I
bruh,
think if anything,
it's,
blacks get treated better than white people.
Hell no. Listen,
Absolutely.
I lived in some of these. I lived in Compton almost my whole life. And the way the police used to treat me and my friends was terrible, bro. And like
not by the police. I'm talking about by the university. I'm talking about by the media, by the institutions. Sorry to interrupt, but
nah, I disagree with that as well too. I feel like now we're getting a lot of light shed on things because of social media and people having more voices than they usually have. But before, a lot of shit used to get swept under the rug. Like where I come from, I seen all type of, injustice that people don't even get to talk about. I got a lot of homeboys behind bars for shit that they didn't do. You know what I mean? Like one of my earliest memories that I could tell you about, I remember I was in a neighborhood one time and I got pulled over. And the police, they were asking me, oh, where you from and everything. They're checking my tattoos and stuff like that. I tell them, oh, nothing, whatever it is, what it is. The fucking, I don't know if it's a chief or whoever it was that pulled me over, he just leaves me for like 30 minutes. You know what I'm saying? In a bad neighborhood. And when he comes back, he smiles at me and my key is bent. I can't even drive my car. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want me to get hurt when I was just, going to work.
that's
doing
your
what I'm doing.
example of he let. Why is the neighborhood bad?
What do you mean?
Who's in the neighborhood?
We
is
have
that a white neighborhood?
No, it's not a white neighborhood.
He bent the key.
He bent the key
Pretty
Oh,
fucked
I
up.
see. Oh, I see. He bent.
to where,
he bent
to
your
why
keys
do you
so
think
could-
to where I couldn't start my car. You know what I'm saying?
Why do you think though that I guess blacks are, like treated better in this country?
Or why is it so hard to believe that there are racist police officers?
I'm not saying there aren't racist.
It's just
police
the idea that
officers.
the whole institution is white supremacist is
I
way
agree
over the
with that,
line.
yeah.
No.
And
we don't-
that's kept to keep people brainwashed and yelling about stupid shit during the quarantine so that they focus on non-problems instead of what's really going on.
No, but
Black Lives Matter didn't solve anything, and they told us to focus on this one instance of George Floyd. So maybe Ye was wrong talking about the fentanyl, I'm not sure. But the whole idea of it was that George Floyd was just used as an example to make everybody outraged, and it worked. And we didn't solve anything with it. $85 million went nowhere, and the neighborhoods that they were trying to protect are worse now.
Well, that definitely seems like it's true, yeah.
No, but
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm not like a big cheerleader for the cops or anything. I'm not like a Blue Lives Matter guy by any stretch. I'm not
Seems a little
by
bit
any
like
stretch a person that's going to say because there's cops that are assholes to black people and white people, and I think the cops as an institution are totally corrupt.
Oh,
When
there
I
are
say-
100% good cops out there. 100%. But, but I feel like a good cop is no longer a good cop when he lets bad cops get away with little shit. But in the same respect, it's like I don't want a cop that's like completely just watching each other for little slip-ups, right? It needs to be a fucking brotherhood. Yeah, right? But people abuse power. So it's like it needs to be a brotherhood where you trust each other. But in the same vein, if you see some dude that's a straight Nazi that has like swastika shit in his locker, shouldn't you say something? Be like, look, I think we should do something about Klaus over here, man. Like, am I bad for saying that? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I remember my martial arts teacher was a fucking, was a black cop in Oakland, one of the first ones, and he had to deal with hella racist bullshit, right? Like, he wasn't accepted into the brotherhood. I don't think, I mean, he might have at some point, but I know it was, like, rocky, right? It was a rough start. So, I don't know, man. I really don't. It's like, race situations are fucked up, especially me, right? Like, I'm not saying I've dealt with hella fucking racist shit in my life. Like, nah, bro, I haven't. Like, all of my friends are fucking white, right? All of my online friends, but my in-person friends aren't white. But I get along with white people just fine. I get along with everybody just fine. Everybody's cool. Everybody's awesome. unless there's something wrong. I get along with you unless there's something wrong with you, right? Like if I meet you, you're automatically you're in my good list, right? Like I don't put you. You're like, oh, cool, yeah. I'm not saying I'd loan you money, but like, you're automatically good to me, right? But like, I don't know. I don't judge people by race. I judge people by like how they carry themselves, really. Like if there's a group of black people, if they're all wearing fucking suits and ties and like holding fucking like newspapers and shit, I know they're fucking Muslims, right? If they're fucking sagging and fucking, look like they're fucking with the shit, then I know they're with the shit. So I'm like, all right, be prepared for something to pop off. It honestly depends. I judge people by how they carry themselves, not really by their race. Then again, I always watch my surroundings too. Because motherfuckers, they'll get your ass.
Say that, like George Floyd's a perfect example. Here's a guy who is a criminal. Here's a guy who is dealing drugs. He's got a long rap sheet. He's a burglar. And the guy clearly died from fentanyl. The autopsy report in that county said that he died of a heart attack. And he had all these drugs in his system. He not only had fentanyl, but also had methamphetamine in his system.
But the
so it's not really,
coroner said
the coroner
that he
didn't say
died
that.
from
He
the
died
knee on his neck,
from the
right?
knee on his neck.
Autopsy said it was a heart attack. Autopsy said it was a heart attack.
Is there a disagreement between the
Yeah.
autopsy and the coroner?
I believe there were 2 autopsies performed. I think there was one that was performed by the county and one that was performed by somebody else. But yeah, there was a dispute about that. And they did find drugs in his system. So, and in any case...
But what does drugs have to do with the situation of why he got arrested in the first place?
Well, he died from he got arrested because he was trying to pass a counterfeit bill. So he was in the process of committing a crime. And then he was tweaking out because he was high. And then he was in this unfortunate position where, you're high and probably having some kind of heart attack or some kind of medical episode while you're in the process of an arrest.
Well, if you can't breathe and you're screaming out, mommy, you know what I'm saying? And you're saying that you can't breathe and they keep putting force on him. I mean,
he was saying he couldn't breathe before he was on the ground. He was saying he couldn't breathe before they were trying to get him into the cop car, and he was saying that. And I understand what you're saying, but the problem is we start in the middle of the story where you got a guy who's like a criminal. You got a guy who's in the process of committing.
No, but like that's not even the point. Do you see how Nick Fuentes does this, right? Because he believes in race realism. He honestly believes that if you're black or if you're Mexican, then you're not as smart as whites or Asians. And if you're white, you're not as smart as Asians, but you can lead the Asians because you're better at blah, blah, blah. He's been kicked off all social medias, okay? All social medias he's been kicked off of, right? For selling this bullshit. But he started his own, streaming sort of business, streaming website called Cozy TV. He started his own streaming platform because he got kicked off of everything else. Okay? So, there's a reason why. Okay, he starts off very soft and then tries to defend all of his bullshit. He starts off very soft and then tries to defend all of his bullshit, and it doesn't work. At least not if you have any fucking sense in your head. It's like, what killed a guy? Well, one coroner says heart attack. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was the guy kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes. Maybe that kills you. Maybe Nick wants to take a cool 9 real fast and see if he can get up after that. I don't know.
A crime, and he's high. And people want to start the story where he's on the ground and say, oh, well, they shouldn't have done this technique or whatever. And it sort of ignores the fact that, why do you have so much exposure between the police and black people? It's because black people are committing the majority of the violent crime.
Really?
That's the real problem. If they had a crime rate similar to white people, there'd be a lot fewer incidences overall of police involved or cop involved shootings with black people or negative situations like that. So That's always the issue.
When I listen to Nick, I have a hard time trying to dissect it because I consider myself a truthful person. So when I listen to what he's saying, it's like I think Nick leads with statistics and facts a lot of time. And that's the problem, is that we're meant to think like people like him are bad and we're supposed to push back. And if you don't push back, you are going to get in trouble uploading this video. Part of the reason I got a couple strikes.
I don't give a fuck about the pushback and everything.
No,
like
but
that.
I just want to finish the point. Like, you're supposed to, or else like that was part of the reason I was terminated on YouTube, was I was listening to Nick and I was laughing and I wasn't disagreeing. But he could be on Destiny's channel or he could be on other people's channel who disagree with him and they keep you on. And I think that should show. But when I listen to him, and Adam, you called him a white supremacist.
It's because you're not smart
earlier.
enough.
I'm not name calling at all. I'm just trying to get him to be
It's literally because you're not smart enough to fucking combat him. It's like, sure, you can say black people commit more crimes. Who's also lives in fucking more impoverished situations? You know, blacks or whites. It's like fucking obviously black people, right? Who commits the most crimes? It's also who's fucking. There's more statistics than just, oh, well, black people commit more crimes than anybody else. That's bullshit.
upfront about his
but you
feelings.
said that. You said that Nick is a white supremacist. I'm curious to like what he said specifically that makes you think that.
Well, I did hear leaked audio of you comparing a white woman having sex with a dog to having sex with a black man, and saying that it was basically the same level of degeneracy, and that was like leaked audio. So I felt like that was kind of telling about what you might say behind the scenes.
Yeah, and
maybe that was a joke.
Well, no. I mean, I can explain the.
It didn't sound like a joke.
Well, hang on. I can explain the context of that. And the thing is, I'm going to answer that. But first, I want to say the better question is, because I saw your stream yesterday, full disclosure, Adam, on Twitch, where you went to the SPLC, which is an advocacy group.
And I will acknowledge that the SPLC has deemed a lot of people and different podcasts that I enjoy like basically hate groups. So I don't put a lot of faith in their opinion off rip. So I did go there to get some information on stream, but I'm not saying that I deem them a respectable organization.
Well, and that's fair enough, but I'm saying the point is, and this is the question that should be asked about that, they're advocates. That's an advocacy group, and they're paid to mine. I've been doing streaming for 6 years. I produce thousands and thousands of hours of content. They're paid to mine, the 10 or 15 worst things, 10-second. Like, let me ask you, you don't know the circumstances surrounding that clip, but it was provided there for you in a 10-second bite for you to get a certain impression of me. And that clip is from 5 or 6 years ago. I know you might say, well, it doesn't matter how old it is because of the content is so offensive. But it sort of begs a certain question, which is, why does this exist? Who's paying for this? To what end? Why is the SPLC? Because at the time, I'm an 18-year-old kid. The circumstances about that is I was at a job training, and it was like 3 a.m. It's late at night. It was for a political thing. And I was saying that I'm against race mixing. I think that people should marry their own kind. I want a white wife. That's a value that I have. My race matters to me. My identity matters to me. I want my kids to look like me. I want my grandkids to look like me. I think that's a positive value that I think other people should share as well. I don't judge people that are mixed race. I mean, some people say I'm mixed race. My dad's half Mexican. My mom's Italian. Some people would say that's mixed race. Obviously, I don't hate people that are mixed race or people that race mix, but it's just a value for me. And anyway, so I was explaining that, and this girl picks up her phone because I'm saying something that's because you can't be against race mixing, even though everybody was and every race other than whites still is.
Even black people say that all the time. I want to have black kids. I want to raise a black family. I'm black and proud. If black people say that, nobody blinks an eye. But when Nick says it, people are automatically assuming that it's something racist. And I think in that context, I think that could be a joke. And I think that if you record any white kids Call of Duty lobby when they're 18 years old, or you record anybody at 3 a.m. when they're not knowing, I've made jokes like that. I make jokes about every single race. It doesn't mean that you're a racist person, but nowadays you have to be very careful at any moment because you never know when someone's going to record it.
Well, wait, but so the point is, I'm saying that's the part that wasn't recorded, is I'm saying I'm against race mixing. Well, she sees me saying something that you're not supposed to say and says, I'm going to cancel this guy. So she gets her phone out and starts recording and says, hey, Nick, so do you think that having sex with a black guy is the same as having sex with a dog. So I didn't say that. Those were not my words. I was saying I'm against race mixing. She gets the phone out and frames it that way. And I said, no. And Adam, you saw the clip. I said, no, it's not the same. I said, but they both be degenerate. I said, they both be wrong. And then the same way that I would say, yeah, incest is wrong. Is incest the same as bestiality? No. Is rape the same as bestiality? These are all things which I would consider wrong.
They're both degenerate.
But
Sneeko just hops on board and is basically like, "Oh yeah, it's fucked up."
I heard him explain this whole thing before.
But you think race mixing is bad?
I don't think race mixing is bad, but I respect his opinion to think that he wants to further the white race and have white kids. See, I'm not going to judge what he wants to do.
I would have thought in any other timeline that Nick saying like, "Oh, white people should just be with other white people," I would have thought that would be a super controversial statement, but it's hard for me to really take it that controversially when we've had people like Tariq Nasheed on here who clearly says the same thing about black people. Kevin Samuels basically said the same thing about black people.
People say that all the time. That's the problem wasn't that.
White people don't say that. White people are not allowed to say that.
He just said it.
Well, that's why he's canceled. He's on a no-fly list.
It's just hard for me to really take issue with him saying that when I feel like there's so many.
Bruh, but it's like it's bad for anybody to say that, right? Like if your kid comes home with a man, a woman, or anybody that you don't fuck, unless they're old as shit, then you're a fucking piece of shit for not fucking with them. If your fucking daughter comes home with a fucking a woman and you're like, I don't like you because you're a woman, like unless that person treats your daughter the wrong way, then you should not be okay with it. I think there's still such a thing as like age. Like, I'm not okay with my fucking 18-year-old banging some 30-year-old, but like I am not gonna like stop her from dating any race or anybody of any kind of race. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not what's happening. Okay, like, you can date whatever you want. Like, you know what I mean? As long as they're treating you properly. If you get a feeling about somebody and you're like, I don't like them just because I don't like them, and they're like, oh, you don't like me because of my race. And it's like, nah, bruh, it's not your race, it's something else. Then that's completely different. But, like, if you don't have a reason not to like somebody, then other than like their race, then you're a piece of shit. You're probably racist a little bit. If you're okay with gay marriage until your son is like, I want to date guys, then you're homophobic. It's a little bit, that's just sort of how it is, bruh. I'm sorry. That's the ultimate test. You know what I'm saying? It's not okay if somebody is like, okay, now you have to date guys, and you're not into that. That's different. But if your son or your daughter is like, I'm gay, or I'm, I want to date a black guy or something like that, then it's... Now, if somebody is like, you have to date a black person or you're racist, that's bullshit, okay? You should date whoever you want to date, but you shouldn't want to put that on your children, and you shouldn't want to put that on other people of your race. That make any sense? I don't know.
Other races who basically say the same thing publicly and aren't really like held in any kind of negative light for it.
I think that's why Nick was saying that it's easier to be a minority nowadays. I think when he talks about that, he's talking about freedom of speech. I think I'm a protected class, being Asian, black, and white. I'm able to talk about a lot of things and make jokes that Nick is not capable of. But even then, you could still tote the line and get canceled, as we've both been terminated.
Yeah, bro.
Right. But, I still haven't seen you. I disagree. I've heard Destiny bring up that same instance. I'm curious to what do you think Nick has said that's made you think he's a white supremacist? Besides that,
what about the black people's hands should be cut off at the airport?
No. Well, I don't mean them.
Funny.
Like what? How?
Do you see? Starts trying to laugh. He's instantly trying to laugh it off.
In what context?
Because it was part of a joke. It's part of because I'm talking about. Because I'm talking about how there was this development where I think it was American Airlines or one of the big airlines said that gay men or well, it's not just gay men. It says that men can wear the girls' flight attendant uniform and the girls can wear the male flight attendant uniform. And I said, you look at these videos from World Star or whatever on social media of black people fighting on planes. And, and I don't know, you're going to pretend this doesn't exist, like these videos of black people fighting everywhere at Disney World, at the airport, at restaurants.
Everybody fights.
Everybody fights everywhere.
Not like that. Not.
I just seen a white nigga hit somebody, bam, in the back of the head on a plane.
Yeah, come on, Nick.
It happens
There-
everywhere.
yeah, it's not to say that- it's not to
wait a
say
minute,
that
it's
black
not-
people
it's
are the
not
only
just-
people-
It's not just black
Okay.
people. Everybody fights everywhere.
So you're into. I mean, listen.
It's not no denial. It's the truth.
It is denial. It is
It's-
denial. To
so
say
you're
that
saying-
that's not like
so
a
you're
black
saying only
phenomenon.
black people fight at Disneyland and fight in airports and airlines.
I'm saying that
You a
when I go on
statistics guy,
social,
you with the truth. Not what you see on social media. Where's the facts? I can show you videos right now where white people, black people, Mexican people, Asian people, everybody's fighting everywhere.
yeah,
It really,
okay. I know everybody fights, but I'm just saying what I
so
see
why
on social media.
Why single out?
It happens
black
more
people?
with black people. It happens way more with black people.
See, I came up to the same conclusion before I even knew Nick when they were talking about the Stop Asian Hate Crimes in New York City. And then I talked to every single Asian person. And like I went to these protests and it made me really upset. I watched all the videos and the uncomfortable truth was Asians were afraid to talk about how most of the attacks, I would say 90% of them were black people because it's a protected class. You don't want to come off racist. And so they lumped it in and they use the crime statistics, which is hate crime. And hate crime is anything. If you say the word, use a racial slur against an Asian person, that's a hate crime. But the Stop Asian Hate attacks was like when an old Asian lady gets pushed over into the train tracks or an old Asian lady gets punched in the head 40 times. And if you look at what race is doing that, it was black people. And the reason, whatever justification you want to make for it, overall in New York City, there's more bums, there's more homeless people, there's more poor people that are black than other races. And so that's why poor people commit crimes more often.
Again, like he's not wrong. Like we're 14% of the population, and we're responsible for 50% of the violent crimes. So he's not wrong. Like we commit violent crimes more than any other race. But I guess where AD point is simply just fighting at Disney World or at an airport. How do you just attribute that to black people?
Well, and this is where tone matters. When I say I want to chop people's hands off, what I said was, you think about airplanes and airport security and it's TSA and everything because of what, Al-Qaeda, 9/11. I said, well, and this is explaining the joke kind of defeats the point of it, but I said, well, I'd rather have the Taliban run the airlines and cut off the hands of all the black people fighting on the airplanes and put the flight attendants in burqas than have what we have now, the current TSA regime, where you're going to have black people fighting on the plane and then a male flight attendant in high heels is going to go run and break it up. It wasn't an assertion of fact of like, well, we looked at the data and black people are fighting on airplanes more than anybody, although I presume that's true. I haven't done the research, but I presume that's true. And so it's a joke. And the
But
point is,
see-
AD, and
Do you see how it turns into, oh yeah, I presume it's black people that's doing all the crimes, and like it's all just like racist bullshit once you get down to it.
I'm a little bit disappointed. If you can't say like you know what I'm talking about, if you're gonna take umbrage at the fact that I say black people are fighting at the airport in Disneyland and say, well, white people fight too, like you don't know what I'm talking about, that's just like either dishonest or delusional. I mean, I'm just telling it to you straight up. To say that makes me a racist because I have fucking eyeballs
Oh, I didn't
and I see what people say
I didn't call
on
you
Twitter.
anything. I'm just saying it's wrong.
Well, you said it was white supremacists. See, both of the instances that you guys brought up were kind of jokes.
You didn't hear
taken
white
out of
supremacists
context.
come out of my mouth for any
No, that was the
instance.
question. My question was, can you name something that makes Nick a white supremacist? And both of you brought up jokes that, like, out of context, and the way you're saying it sounds bad, but that's what social media does now. You take things out of context to position somebody in a bad way.
I believe that 100%. You're right.
Right. So, and I think that kind of proves what you just brought up. But like, what belief has Nick said that makes you think that he's a racist or a white supremacist?
How about
With the question though, so
how
isn't
about
like
race realism?
again, I may be like
race
severely
realism.
misinformed. Isn't a white supremacist just like somebody
on.
who thinks that white folks are supreme, right?
Yeah.
To the other races. Well, Nick, like, don't you think that white folks are supreme?
No, and I answered that earlier. And the thing is about so-called white supremacy is it has to be a materialist worldview. You can, in my opinion, well, actually, that's not totally true. But as far as white people go, for the most part, you really have to not believe in the soul and believe in God to be a white supremacist. You can't be a Christian. You can't be, which is what most religious white people are. You can't be a Christian and say that white people are better than other people, because Christianity is a universal religion. It says in the Bible, that neither Gentile nor Jew. Now, people take that to mean like, oh, that means everybody's equal all the time or something. But it means that we're all Christian. We all have a brotherhood in Christ, and we are all equal before God in terms of our soul. For you to say
I
that
look
white
like a
people's
OG.
race are better than other people, it's like, well, in what sense? Then you'd have to measure it out. and attribute supreme value to a particular thing and say, well, if white people are better at something than another group of people, that makes them better as a holistic thing. And that, again, that you have to be non-religious to view it that way. So white supremacy is incompatible with being a Christian, and I'm Catholic. I am Christian. So
Yeah. Now, a better question is, what do you think that white folks are better at, than I guess any other race?
better than any other race.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that every race has their strength. I would say the white people are very good at literature and architecture and philosophy and
Basically everything.
well,
No,
I mean,
he
lots of
didn't
things.
say anything. He didn't talk
niggas
about
can
dance.
jump.
He didn't talk about culture. He didn't talk about art. He didn't talk about creativity. He talked about pattern recognition.
So you think that the soul of a black person is to be like a great artist or dancer or what?
Basketball player, football
Well,
player.
no, now you're talking about soul. I think that, yeah, I mean, black people are great athletes and they're great artists. And that's not to say that black people can't be other things or do other things, but we're
But it's
talking
just-
about the strengths
In
of
general.
the
And yeah, I see that this is, I think I just saw the hypocrisy here. See, if we asked AD and your name is Josh?
No, that's Flacco.
Wait,
Flacco, yeah.
If Flacco and AD, if we ask you, like, what do you think black people are better at than white people? You would both say dancing, music, basketball, like, and probably make fun of white people for being awkward. And nobody would get mad. Nobody would get mad at that. Everybody would accept that as a universal truth. That in general,
agree.
black people are better at music. And then Nick says an honest answer, better at innovation, better at architecture. And then it's like, oh, well, so black people can't do it, right? See, you get offended when Nick is truthful about the white race, but you can be truthful about other races and then nobody blinks an eye.
Hey, I have
Well,
a
and-
question though, right? So, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No. So, like, when like Nick says that white folks are better at like innovation, like, what did that mean?
Well, here's a good example. Asians, if you look at IQ, we talked about IQ earlier. Asians actually outperform whites dramatically on IQ tests and on math tests. And if you look at some of these tests, standardized tests before university. So if you were to say strictly by IQ and by certain tests, you would say actually that Asians are smarter. Now, would you call me that? Because I say that, would you call me an Asian supremacist? Would you say that I think that Asians are better than everybody because they have a higher IQ in terms of this metric? When I say whites are more innovative, it's because although Asians have very high IQ
what's up, Scoop?
and clearly predisposed to being good at math, I know that's like a stereotype, but it's based on fact. They outperform every other group in math. They're not as innovative, and that has a lot to do with their culture. That has a lot to do with their history, and of course, history and culture are in fact bound up with genetics. Behavior is bound up with genetics. You know, we say things like the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. What does that mean? Children are like their parents. And there's a question about, is that nature? Is that nurture? It has a great deal to do with nature, more so than many people care to admit. And the point is, so Asians, although you could say in one sense they're smarter, you said better than other groups, they're maybe not as innovative. That's why they steal American technology. That's why they struggle to do a lot of things the Americans do. And so the point is, and I get back to the previous point, all human beings, I believe, have inherent dignity, and they have a soul, and they have a brotherhood and
He
universality.
just thinks that white people should run them all. You know what I'm saying?
Equality before God. But that does not change the fact that there are inequalities between peoples and groups on various different things. But would you say that because blacks are better athletes, that they're better, they're the best race? Would you say that because Asians are the best at math, that they're the best race? Or because, whites have the finest literature, that they're the best? Who's to say? Those are all material things. Those are all based on, material conditions. If you have a religious view, then we're not just material, we have souls. And so we should be afforded rights and respect and dignity based on the fact that we're all human beings.
And I will say, though, that conversation,
Oh, yes.
it is very weird that that's not a conversation that's really allowed to be had in public. And obviously somebody like Nick, who's been, characterized the way that he has been publicly, him having that conversation, a lot of people are going to reject it or whatever. But like a lot of people have had their careers basically dismantled for just having the nerve to have the conversation about the correlation between race and IQ.
But see, do you see though, Schmitty? He reels you in with like good points, right? He'll come in, bring in, and then it's just like, all right, And then now, okay, now that we're off of No Jumper, like, this is like this is just like perfume that he's spraying all on his bullshit. All right, this is all perfume, right? But like the shit that makes you want to punch him, that's the shit that he really believes. He's going to expound upon those points later. Like, this isn't a situation where it's like, oh, he's going to start. No, he's saying some shit that you can get on the boat with, right? Oh, I'm not racist, but yeah, what you're saying makes sense. Let me hop on board. And then as you're fucking going down the road, he's like, all right, you're here? Cool. Throw the oar out the fucking window, and now he starts going ham. Conversation about how many people died in World War II. Oh,
You got to just deal with Bitcoin now, or what?
Yeah, I basically just do Bitcoin. I mean, the thing is, I've had checking accounts. They just keep getting banned. I had a checking.
Wait a second. Did that get cut out?
I got banned from Bank of America. I got banned from Chase. I got banned from U.S. Bank.
Yeah, he's
I got
also a
banned
Holocaust
from,
denier.
I think one other one. I was on a local bank. They just banned me a month ago. I started up a new bank account. I'm hoping that goes okay. But yeah, I mean, the censorship thing is really critical because it's like Kanye, years ago,
what's
people,
up,
well, maybe they forget, maybe not. He went on TMZ and said slavery was a choice. Now, would you say that constitutes something like slavery denial, if there's such a thing? We don't have a word for it. There's no museums, but would you say that constitutes something akin to? He said slavery's a choice, and he was fine. He was fine. He put out his Jesus is King album. He put out Donda. He performed in Atlanta. He performed in Chicago and Miami. Then he said White Lives Matter, and he started talking about Jews. Then he lost his bank account. Then he got kicked out of stadiums. Then he got locked out of Instagram. Then he got locked out of Twitter. It's like,
Yeah.
that kind of says where the parameters are. What's the line you can't cross? Everybody knows it's Jews.
So it's not comparable to blacks and Asians. Jews have the ultimate power. And that's not even anything hateful. I don't want people to label me as anti-Semitic. I'm already canceled, but that's just true. They have ultimate control and power, and they will abuse it if they need to protect their agenda.
Yeah, I mean, there's no use arguing that one since we just saw it happen in front of our eyes with the Kanye bank situation. It's like, I mean, I don't know if he's going to end up regretting
that one is wild.
having said that shit or what, but
No,
I
he's not.
mean,
He's a genuine person. I think it's good that he's starting this conversation because, like, me and Nick tried to have it, but we only have a limited level of power. The fact that one of the most famous artists of all time and a billionaire saying it is like good. Now people are going to start turning their heads to this.
because this is the thing. I look down upon it, but there are a lot of fucking people out there who do not like Jewish people, and Kanye really is the first person I could pretty much think of in terms of like major celebrities to
Nick
come
Cannon.
out and really take that stance that that a lot of people would say behind closed doors. So
Nick
the
Cannon
fact
did it.
that
He
he
lost a
did
lot of
it,
deals.
because
Ice
he
Cube
really
did it.
sees himself as like the vanguard that's going to say
hate
the
Jewish
things
people,
that
though.
nobody else will say.
he says that black people can't never be anti-Semitic because we are Jews. That's what Kanye says.
Yeah. Now
He got the battery in his back from Candace, and he's out here saying shit that nobody ever said before.
Yeah,
I've heard
I
that
definitely
before.
think Kanye is wrong. Like when he tried to do the Hotep Negro shit of like, yo, but like black folks is the original.
Yeah, what the fuck
that's
is that?
that
Yeah,
Hotep
bro.
shit.
Like, Nick Cannon got canceled for that though, because he brought like some dude on and who was saying that black folks are the original Jews, and all type of Hotep shit. Yeah.
Damn. But what does
Yeah,
it
that
even
comes
mean?
from Farrakhan. That comes from Minister Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, because
Right.
Farrakhan has talked to Ye and he's talked to Nick Cannon and these other guys. And yeah, I don't subscribe to the Black Hotep stuff, but and Ye's coming at it from a position of credibility too. I mean, a lot of people are so quick; they have this allergic reaction. Anybody talking about Jews, but it's like if anybody knew, wouldn't it be a guy like Ye? Because he's not only like one of the biggest
Really?
guys in music, period, but he's
Really,
also one of
Nick?
the biggest guys in streetwear, period. And he's talked about for years that he's interested in business and he wants to do architecture and he wants to do clothing and he wants to do all these different.
There's a reason why we call Nick a little baby Nazi. It's because his real hatred is for Jews, the Jewish people. He is anti-Semitic as fuck, more than anything else. Okay, more than anything else, and I don't know. Like it's kind of coming out now. He's a Holocaust denier, all that shit, and you can like see it, you can smell it on him.
Different kinds of things. And it's like, so if anybody would know, he's been to the White House, wouldn't it be him of all people? And the point being is, whenever you talk about Jews, people say, well, there's something wrong with you, like you're like a sick individual, or you have some trauma, or you're insane, or you're a grifter. And it's like you look at Ye, who's clearly none of those things. Like he's rich.
He's clearly going through a
mainstream.
mental fucking breakdown.
Yeah.
I don't think
he's been
so.
on a mental
He's-
breakdown for 6 years.
He's going through a mental breakdown, and then he's got a bunch of right-wing grifters like Candace Owens who got the battery in his back. He's just going out there to people like Nori who have never heard them, and he's just reiterating right-wing talking points that Candace is feeding him. And anybody who's
Candace Owens
anybody
is
who's
talking
watched
about
her
Jews?
can see it transparently.
Candace Owens is not talking
Married
about
to a Jew, right?
Candace is
Candace
smart enough
Owens
to not say that
works
shit
for a
publicly,
Jew.
but I'm sure he has all kinds of sources for his ideas at this point.
Nah, I think it's just him working in all types of industries and seeing. If you work in the music industry, you know every single drill rapper has a Jewish guy behind him, and they profit off of murder. In every single industry, if you look at the end of the rabbit hole, it's always a Jew who controls it. Real
Everybody
estate,
who has a
who's
chance to is profiting off of murder in the
Yeah.
entertainment
That's-
industry.
that's-
All right, but that besides the point, Adam, that's the truth.
You're
Behind
saying
the scenes,
the label owners, the people behind the
label
scenes.
owners, the real estate owners, like all the people with the most amount of money behind the scenes is a Jewish guy. And I think for Kanye to become a billionaire, he's seen a repeated pattern, and he's a type of guy who wants to give the power, that same power, to his people. And so he's talking about the fact that, look, why are we out here slaving away for Jews who are profiting off of us killing each other?
Yo,
And he's been saying this for years. Even before this, you say, well, he's in the midst of a mental breakdown. He's been talking about this stuff since
fine.
2013. When he was on the Breakfast Club in
Yep.
2013, he said blacks don't have the same connections Jews do. And then the ADL came after him and said, that's anti-Semitic, that's an age-old anti-Semitic trope. And it's like, well, it's true. I mean, it's obviously true that Jews have connections everywhere in finance, Hollywood, media, universities. They're overly represented in university, 1,200%. 1,200% more
Yep,
Jews
he
in
did.
Ivy League universities than in the American population. So it's a factual statement.
Is that
But
because
the-
affirmative action helps them get more placement?
Well, no. Well, number one, no. And that's neither here nor there because it's a factual statement. You
I'm
could say,
excited.
well, why is it? But it's true. And he got called anti-Semitic by a Jewish group. You could say, well, they're more overrepresented for one reason or another reason, but they are overrepresented. They do have connections. And Ye said, blacks need connections like Jewish people have connections. Factual statement. And the ADL, which is Jewish, says, you're anti-Semitic. You need to apologize. You're a terrible person. And Farrakhan.
Oh,
backed
yeah,
him
I'm
up.
planning on
So he's been
playing
saying this for
campaign
years.
with,
It's just that, and he
peanut
said in
butter.
the interview, he said, he didn't want to split apart his family because obviously to say these things, he said he was living in a glass prison where he's up there, he's
Well, here it's
elevated, he's
co-op.
got the big house and everything, but he can't say what he needs to say, even though he's influential and rich and everything.
Oh, it ain't?
He's still in a prison because there's certain lines he can't cross, and he wanted to hold his family together. And then he said he finally had enough. That was in the Tucker interview. So that I would push.
And
back
I think it's
against.
it's too easy to overwrite something that by saying that he's just he's a bot for Candace Owens, or he's repeating right-wing talking points, and that he's on a mental breakdown, or he's insane. I just did a podcast, Adam, with academics 2 days before you, and he said the exact same thing. And I was talking about what Ye was trying to expose before the Drake Champs interview, and he said the same thing. He's clearly off his meds, bipolar. Bro, so he's been off his meds in a bipolar mental manic
Yeah.
episode for fucking 6 years. He went to the hospital in
It's gonna
2016
be,
after the Pablo show. So if he's been on a
Co-op
6-year-long
release.
manic episode, that's the longest manic episode ever. And even
Listen,
in that
me-
period, he's
me
made
and-
billions of dollars.
Me and academics have been paying extremely close attention to to Kanye's life for, like, in my case, easily like 20 years, like since he first came on the scene. And my honest perspective is that, yes, the stresses of just being unbelievably rich and having his family taken away from him and all these other things are weighing on him to the extent that he's having something that I would describe as a mental breakdown. I would say that is fair to
6
say.
years straight.
And I think it's very convenient that a lot of these right-wing type people are just there to sort of like slide their narrative in with him. But I mean, you're right. Like, he's been very susceptible to this stuff for a long time. And I realize that when I talk about him like that I'm kind of infantilizing him, I believe is how you say it.
Yeah, you
and, I think that's probably kind of fair, but I feel like he's in like a weakened mental state and that people are taking advantage of it.
Yeah, I just would disagree with that because, the people around him are not pushing anti-Jewish views. I mean,
Nobody
Candace
is.
Owens, and certainly not Candace Owens. And to some extent, Well, here would be my counterexample. In 2018, when he put on the MAGA hat and he went to the White House, two people came in: Candace Owens, who is his friend, and Candace Owens at the time, she works now for Ben Shapiro at Daily Wire. At that time, she worked for Turning Point USA. She worked for Charlie Kirk, and so Candace Owens with Charlie Kirk was meeting with Ye, and they were trying to get him to do Brexit conferences and do Turning Point stuff. And if you remember, it was in the end of the summer, I think in the beginning of the fall 2018, Kanye said, "I'm done with politics. I'm being used, and I don't like it anymore." So even you could say at the height, if you're saying that he's in a mental health crisis, when he released the album Ye, I'm Bipolar, It's Awesome, even then he recognized,
didn't know that.
oh, like Charlie Kirk and Turning Point are using me. He recognized that within months and said, yeah, I'm not really about this. I'm done with politics. He comes back later, and this time, nobody's putting this Jew. You could say that if he was doing Brexit, yeah, that's a Charlie Kirk program. Candace Owens, I believe, like Sneeko said, is married to a Jew. At the minimum, she works for Ben Shapiro, who's a Zio Jew, a turbo Zionist Jew. So it's certainly, it's not him, or it's not her, and it's not Scott Adams, who he follows, or Ali Alexander, any of his other political contacts. It's probably Farrakhan, somebody who's been talking to since 2013 at least. And I would say that it's awfully convenient for whenever people talk about Jews, it's convenient to say, oh, well, they're just crazy. Oh, well, people are always rationalizing, looking for an excuse instead of, and this is what I put on my Telegram when it happened. What did he say that was factually wrong? Are Jews not all over the media industry? Like, is that not true? It is true. And is talking about their influence, is that off limits for everybody in every circumstance? Like, are we not permitted to talk about how many Jews are in media and what their influence might look like and what the implications of that are? Why is that a bad thing? Why do you have to be crazy to talk about that?
It is interesting how we've been sort of trained to understand that certain things are off limits. And we all reactively knew that Kanye had officially crossed a line that nobody had really crossed, and that would be like probably 3, devastating for his career. Yeah, but he said a lot of stuff in the Drink Champs interview that's pretty much like on par with the DEFCON 3 thing, or maybe even crazier. Yeah. But Nick, one thing I was surprised by is because I would have thought of you as being somebody who was like extremely pro-America, but then I read a quote that said that you said that basically Ukraine deserves what they're getting right now from Russia because Ukraine is aligned with America and America is the great Satan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I would distinguish between America, which is like you and me and Sneeko and like the people, and like.
What about me and Flacco?
And yeah, and you guys too. So I just don't really know you guys as well.
What? Bro, you see instantly.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? The two black guys?
Well, no, I don't know Flacco. AD, I just saw you recently. But yeah, you guys too. You guys are America, and people like Kanye and Candace Owens, for that matter, and John Miller and everybody. And I would distinguish that from the regime. What I call the regime, what some people call the government, I call it the regime, because America isn't just run. The authority in America doesn't just come from the government. It comes from a true regime, in the sense that the government is influenced by the media, and the government influences the media. And the same is true of Silicon Valley, and the same is true of the banks, and the same is true of Wall Street. And really what you have are maybe 5,000 to 10,000 decision makers across many elite institutions that are making decisions inside the government, outside the government, and the government is in bed with private institutions too. They're in bed with the Federal Reserve and the banks and BlackRock and Wall Street and so on. Anyway, and so when I talk about America's a great Satan and Ukraine should be punished and all this, I'm talking about this regime. I think the regime of America is evil. They do regime change in Libya. They do regime change in Iraq. They do regime change in the Balkans. And they did regime change in Ukraine. In 2014, the United States overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine, and they installed a pro-Western leader who was going to invite the European Union and NATO into their country, which Putin had said for years was a red line for Russia. And, and they fought this, they really have been fighting for 8 years. Realistically, ever since the Maidan revolution in 2014, there's been this proxy war going on between the separatists in Donbass and the Ukrainian government backed by NATO in Kiev. And so when I say the U.S. is a great Satan, I mean our military, our State Department, the government, our companies, our NGOs and multinational corporations, they're spreading sin, they're spreading decadence, they're spreading liberalism, they're spreading evil and death and destruction all around the world.
Liberalism.
And so insofar as
evil.
Russia is opposed to the hegemony of the American regime, and I am opposed to the American regime, then that sort of makes us allies.
Interesting. So you're hoping that Ukraine gets wiped off the face of the planet, or are you looking forward to nuclear war, or what are you hoping for in this whole thing?
Well, I've been urging de-escalation. I think that the United States needs an off-ramp here. I mean, because things just keep escalating on both, it's reciprocal on both sides, and it is going to turn into a nuclear war if there isn't restraint, because it just keeps escalating. And so I think the United States needs to accept that Russia is going to win this war. They can't, like, it's literally...
Ukraine is literally winning right now, but okay.
Is not allowable for Putin to lose this war. So we need to recognize that. We need to recognize that Ukraine's not going to win. They're not going to take back Crimea. They're not going to take back Luhansk and Donetsk. So I think they should just withdraw, give it up. Like Elon Musk said, let's hold a UN monitored referendum in the breakaway districts. Let's say Crimea and Donbass are part of Russia. Let's say Ukraine will never join NATO. You know, I think that's a fair resolution, which is what was sought for 20 years.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
how to make things better. You're not doing people any favors by saying, well, you know, they just are a victim of circumstance or something like this. So, because I agree with you, those things are all adverse, obviously, but nobody will hear out the case that maybe we're not all starting from the same place to begin with, which I think there's a lot of evidence for that.
So you're saying genetically black people are more angrier, or, you know, we have a gene in us to commit more crimes, with your logic, correct?
Well, it's that they're more antisocial and a higher incidence of sociopathy.
Yeah.
And on average, lower IQ. And you look at the societies that Africans form elsewhere, I think it bears this out. You know, people look at Africa. Africa's a total disaster. It's a total dump. Sub-Saharan Africa.
How you going?
Africa was fucking every country that could get a hold of Africa, drained it of its resources, took its people. Like, you can't say Africa's a dump after it's been fucking ravaged by fucking England, America, fucking, like, everybody. Everybody's had a piece of fucking Africa.
Don't say that. We have most of the vast resources from Africa.
it was also
That's
colonized
taken,
by everybody in
yeah,
Europe.
they've been
and shit.
taking
yeah,
everything from that.
That's where I'm going with that.
Okay.
So, you know, people look at the state of Africa today, which is just unmitigated disaster, and they say, well, that's because of colonialism. Well, when the colonialism didn't begin until in the interior of Africa until the late 19th century. It wasn't until the late 19th century when there's this big scramble to colonize Africa. And when we arrived there, they didn't have written language. They didn't have two-story buildings. They didn't have complex societies. Like there's no real good record of African history other than what the Muslims or the Christians wrote in northern Africa around the sort of west coast, because they didn't have writing. And I, you know, I don't say that to be ignorant.
Do you? Yeah,
I don't say that to be funny. I'm not saying that to be a
I think you do, because it shows that you have done no fucking research on African history at all.
jackass.
I mean, I haven't either, but
I'm saying that to mean, you know, this is the state of development of that continent, of that people. And so in a sense, it's almost cruel then that you bring these people over into Europe, you bring Africans into Europe or in America, and then they're underperforming, and it turns into, oh, well, you know, it's the government, it's the programs, it's this or that. It's like, well, the level of development wasn't very high to begin with. And I say that with compassion. I don't say that to be condescending. I say that with compassion.
no, he says that to be condescending. And this is where all of this shit always ends. It ends with like, well, you know, to begin with, Africa was pretty bad. Well, colonization only started with, I mean, when did the slave trade start? Right? 1600? That's 17th century. That's when the slave trade started. So I think it was a little bit before the 19th century that colonization happened. We've been taking shit from Africa for years. Okay? And you try to play this shit off as if it's like, oh, well, you know, they didn't have written language. They didn't have dude. They didn't have shit that you know of. Okay, you know nothing of it. And like, you know what? Because we're African Americans and we had that history of slavery, we don't know any of our history in Africa either. We don't know where the fuck we come from. Okay, so we have no defense against that. All right? We don't know anything of Africa to try to defend it against you saying that it didn't have written language or written history or any buildings more than 2 stories in the 19th century. Because I don't believe that's true. But I don't know enough about my African history to defend against that, you know.
It's unfortunate, but that's the way it
If I was to ever have to debate Nick Fuentes or debate any kind of griper, maybe that's something to look into.
was. And, you can't blame the government for the fact they didn't develop written language in thousands of years,
Well, I wish I had a better counter argument to that. I'm sure there is one, but I'm not really.
He's not wrong though.
I'm not really sure how to debate that.
Well,
You love to just latch on to whatever he says, though.
No,
Yeah,
listen. though.
Flacco doesn't
I'm
like
actually
black people.
African.
Yeah, bro, Flacco, man.
Listen, I'm actually
Poetic
African.
Flacco
though.
doesn't like black people.
Right? Like I'm actually African. And he's not wrong.
Do you think there's something like inherently fucked up about African people?
No.
Maybe fucked up isn't the words to use here, but
No. Right? Again, if you like take people who were, let's say, in uncivilized, and bring them here and put, let's say, like an IQ test in front of them, like they'll probably do poorly on it, right? So, right, again, just by default, currently, like we are somewhat be behind the 8 ball, right? Again, like acknowledging those truths, like don't mean it's like it's currently hatred, right? And like he's telling the truth, right? As somebody who's African, I can tell you, we're currently uncivilized.
But even like the fact that he has such an interest in it is obviously part of his overall platform, being that white people are essentially superior to black people, right?
Do you feel white people are superior to black people?
still no. Still no. I don't believe that, because
I tried to get
think
him that time.
well, and I use this as an example, like Kanye is my hero, and he was my hero before he put on the MAGA hat, before he started talking about the media and everything.
What's your favorite album?
The God stuff
My
got
favorite
you
album's
first?
Life of Pablo.
All right, well, favorite song off Life of Pablo.
30 Hours, or Father Stretch My Hands.
Let me get a verse right now,
That is
Nick.
a good album.
Let me get a verse. I give you all the verses. I can name 200 Kanye songs. I know all his albums. I know all the words to it. I have Yeezy in my closet. I have a lot of it because it's expensive, but
Wow.
but I'm a fan, and I consider him one of the greatest geniuses alive right now. If he told me to go work for him, I would say yes, sir, Mr. West. Like I would go.
Definitely seems possible. I wouldn't be at all surprised.
Absolutely, yeah.
I wouldn't be at all.
24 though, right? Like,
All right, I think I'm done with this. Yeah, you guys have been awesome. I've been Herbal, and I'll see you on the next one.